Gateway to Hell, Book 1 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy, by Melinda Kucera, Part 8.
Chapter 30. The Eye of the Gateway. Arginil flew through the dark orange sky toward the four towers of the Library of Forbidden Knowledge. A white light pulsed above the library, and it grew larger while dark clouds swirled around it. That must be the gateway's terminus. Damn it, I must get back and move it somehow away from the library before it tethers itself to it. Arginil flapped his wings faster. When he flew over the central courtyard within the library's walls, he slowed. The blindingly bright eye of the gateway floated perhaps a mile overhead. Was it closer to the ground now than when he first spotted it? How can I tell? Arginil stared up at the gateway. It was thinner at the edges and almond-shaped like an eye. Dark clouds sped toward it from all directions and joined the others circling the expanding bright spot.
What's happening?
And Tears leaned out of a window in one of the library's towers and waved to get his attention. The gateway is forming, and it's right above us like I feared. Arginil yelled over the howling winds, and Tears gripped the deep stone windowsill.
What can we do to stop it?
Indeed, what could they do? Arginil considered their individual skills for a moment, then shook his head. This was beyond them all. I'm the only one with the power to stop it. You can seal the library and make sure no one gets in. That was all the demons who were loyal to him could do, since none had the power to really help him. But they could guard the library and stop anyone the gateway drew to the library from entering. Distrust twisted his thoughts for a moment. Was this all an elaborate setup? Several demons who worked for him saw him take that man to the spire. Could one of them have sent a message to the dread beast? Why would they need to? A dread beast can see for miles. No, it's more likely the creature saw me and used me for its own purposes. What did the dread beast want? I never asked his name. No one ever gave out their true name anyway, and that included him. Arginil gave only a nickname that sounded enough like the name the creator gave him, so he answered when called. Not that it mattered down here, since only the adversary himself was powerful enough to use his real name against him. But in hell, no precautions were wasted.
There must be something we can do,
Antares said, and he sounded disappointed. Arginil ran a hand through his wind-tangled hair. I can't protect the library and stop that gateway at the same time, so it falls to you, my most trusted lieutenant, to protect it for me. This will draw both curious demons and my kind as well. Will you protect the library and its contents for me? He still didn't know if he could stop a gateway, but Arginil didn't mention that. His staff needed to think he was invincible and capable of impossible deeds. I was once that angel, but then I fell. Could he become that angel again? Arginil put such thoughts aside. He must concentrate on saving the library and preventing any of its dangerous knowledge or powerful relics from escaping. Someone went to a lot of trouble to set this up, and I will foil their plans one way or the other. And Tears cast his troubled gaze downward at the gates, and the guards standing by them, gazing up at the spectacle in the sky.
Yes, I'll do it. I'll tell the others, and we won't let anyone in. You can count on us.
Good. Now off you go. I'll see you afterward. If there was an afterward, but Arginil kept that part to himself. He didn't need more doubts, just swift action. Before he could brood anymore, he flew toward the eye of the gateway and tried to remember every scrap of information he ever read or heard about it. But that didn't amount to much more than what everyone knew about gateways. They were quantum tunnels that pierced time and space. One terminus stood in front of the caster, and the tunnel formed as it bored through that realm, and all the others in between there, and where the caster wanted to go. Where's your maker? How many realms are they boring through to reach hell? Arginil wished he knew. The information could help him, but it might not, since the tunnel didn't pass through hell. Just its terminus would land here unless he was misremembering what he read about magical gateways and their construction. The caster must use a lot of power to create the gateway and sustain it, so only a powerful mage would even dare to try. Below, the loud rattle of the metal shutters sliding down over the exterior windows made him smile. His staff was doing as he ordered and barricading the towers. Good. No flyers would get inside now, not with the shutters down. Arginil slowed as the wind buffeted him. It hammered at him with invisible fists, driving him back toward the steeply pitched roof of the library's great hall that housed most of its collection.
Wait for me,
said the agent of order he turned on before leaving to talk to the dread beast. I should never have left. That conversation was useless. The dread beast played me like a fiddle. Arginil clenched his fists and fought against the wind tearing past him, but it was no use. The wind slammed into him, knocking him down, and he fell until he could right himself.
I can help you.
The metal angel flew past him, and somehow the agent of order cut through the wind. A bright line shot out of the glowing eye of the gateway above them, and the agent of order veered to intercept it. The two crashed into each other in a shower of sparks. What is that thing? Arginil shouted over the roar of the wind as he blinked to clear his eyes of the purple aftermages bouncing around in his field of view.
The bright lines it emits are tethers. They seek to anchor the gateway.
said the agent of order, but Arginil still couldn't see the humanoid creature that once stood in the library with the other dangerous relics. I live in interesting times. Arginil rubbed his eyes and they finally cleared. How do we stop those tethers from anchoring the gateway to the library? Not by intercepting them, because the agent of order wrenched the glowing tether that looked a lot like a lightning bolt from its chest. Damn.
I don't know, but we must find a way. We can't let the gateway tether itself to the library. Its opening could breach the shields and free some of the more dangerous relics.
The agent of order pulled the tether further from its chest, but the damned thing split into 5 reaching fingers made of light. You said you could help. How can you help? Because so far the agent of order wasn't much help. Arginil dodged a white ray shooting toward him, and it struck a tower and stuck to its stone wall, like the threads that anchored a spider web. But these rays were many times more powerful. Arginil dived to study it.
My enemies, the agents of chaos, have a hand in this. I can feel it in my gears, so I can help if you'll allow.
The agent of order twisted the glowing tether like it was trying to break off the end. If you can help, then do something about the tethers. Arginil extended his hand and touched the tether. It was hot, but not enough to burn him, and it felt solid like a cord. But a cord could be cut. Can I cut this tether? Why not try? It's not like he had a better plan. Arginil extended his other hand and called forth a weapon he should have lost in the fall, like the other fallen angels. But choosing to fall meant he got to keep some things, like the spirit sword that appeared in his hand. A purple flame ran along its edge. Are you sharp enough to cut? There was only one way to find out. As Arginil raised his spirit blade, he channeled his need into the blade, and it glowed brighter until the purple fires turned white at the tips. Then he slashed the tether. Sparks flew as the tether snapped. 1 down and many more to go. He counted 13, then cursed as another shot toward him. How fast can it generate new tethers? Arginil glared at the one coming toward him until the agent of order flew into its path. White light obliterated his sight as a tether crashed into the metal angel. When Arginil could see again, another tether raced toward the other side of the library, far enough away that he couldn't intercept it in time. Damn. Arginil slashed at the nearest tether, but it didn't break. What the hell? Are the tethers getting stronger? He tried running the blade along the tether like one would cut a thick rope, and it frayed like a rope would. Oh, thank the Creator.
What do I do with these?
The agent of order clutched the 2 rays it intercepted.
If I let go, they'll seek somewhere to anchor themselves.
What if you let them attach to your body? Perhaps you could help me tow this thing. Arginil sawed at the tether. Finally, the sword cut through the last bit of the tether, and the ray darkened and fell onto the roof, then faded away. A bright blur made him spin and glance upward in time to see the gateway slide down its tethers toward the library. No, Arginil sent his spirit blade back to its hidden sheath and flew toward the eye-shaped terminus. The wind slapped him down, and he tumbled until he could right himself.
Where are you going?
The agent of order asked, but Arginil couldn't look away from his goal to check on the metal creature. Someone needs to push this gateway away while you cut the tethers. Arginil pulled his wings close to his body and instead propelled himself upward using his thoughts alone. This wasn't something he'd done in a long time, but he still remembered how to fly without wings. It was a lesson every angel learned, because there was no air to fly through in the starry black void in between realms. Maybe we can move it to the no man's land between the city and the library, but further would be better. Arginil pushed through the winds that buffeted him, stealing the heat from the churning gateway. Just a little closer. He pushed harder with his will until a vein pounded in his neck and pain hammered hot spikes into his eyes. But he must fly on. The gateway was almost within reach. If I can just get my hands on it, I can push it. But only if the agent of order cut the remaining tethers. Could it do that?
Chapter 31. Are you an ally? Garen waited until the guards closed the thick door to his cell and locked it. Then he groaned in relief and removed the knife from where he hid it in his pants. Oh, stars above, I heard. But none of his wounds were serious enough to bleed out, so he limped over to the cot and collapsed onto it, ignoring the blood leaking out of the wound in his hand. It would stop eventually, and even if any of his wounds were serious, he was already in hell. Dying wasn't an option anymore. He would heal on his own, but a healer would be faster and probably more painful since this was hell, and pain was power here. He thought one of the guards ordered someone to tend to his wounds as he yawned, but he remembered the knife and shoved it under the thin mattress. It wasn't a great hiding spot because the guards would probably check there for contraband at some point, but it was the best he could do right now. So he left the knife there and swung his legs onto the cot. The cell faded away when he closed his eyes.
Garen,
Whispered the lady who sent him on the mission that landed him in prison. That wasn't her fault, though. Scorched earth surrounded him again just as it had when he first met her. Leafless trees smoldered in the distance like her glowing violet eyes. She stood in the middle of that destruction, garbed in white robes like a defiant sacrifice. Her black hair rippled down her back when she glided toward him, and he forgot to breathe. But this was hell, and he was an ex-pagan god, so he didn't know if he actually needed to breathe. He did need to when he fought and loved in the mortal world, but the rules were different down here.
did you find it?
She rested a long, bony hand on his chest, and that sent a pleasant ripple of desire through him. Garen nodded before he could think about whether he should answer that question. I found it, but I'm trapped in this damned cell, so I can't do anything about it. Can you help me escape? She shook her head, and regret dimmed her eyes.
I can't help you any more than I already have.
She touched the pendant she gave him before he left on his ill-fated quest to the library. You don't have anyone at the Spire who can unlock a door so I can escape? Garen found that hard to believe for someone with her power and influence. After all, the rebels fought for her.
No, and not for a lack of trying, I assure you.
The sleeping angel slid her hand down his chest, but the book of names stayed quiet when her hand passed over the mark it left behind when it fused with him. Of course, she couldn't see the mark because his tunic covered it, but she must have felt something because her hand lingered over the spot.
Can you escape on your own?
She tried to catch his gaze, and he realized that he was staring at her hand on his chest like an idiot. You fool, you'll give away where the book of names is if you don't stop staring at it. Garen stepped back so her hand no longer touched him, but he felt cold and bereft of her touch. This is ridiculous. She's playing me, and goddamn him, he wanted her to play him because that meant she must put her hands on him again. Not yet, but I'll find a way out of here, don't worry, he said when he remembered what she asked him.
Good.
She purred as she traced his jawline.
And the book, may I see it?
Garen tensed since the book was now inside him, and he didn't want to explain that. He needed something else to say. Maybe I can hint that the book is hidden somewhere I can get to when I escape. It's safe. I'd rather not reveal its location until I'm away from here in case someone's watching this dream. That was a real concern, because there were dream thieves in hell, and he was quite sure at least one of them worked at the Spire. After all, the demons who ran the Spire weren't fools, and only a fool would pass up an opportunity to view inmates' dreams and get information from them. She studied him for a long, tense moment before relenting.
Very well. What are your plans once you're out of here?
I'll get the book from where I hid it and find the rebels like I promised. Garen shrugged, then remembered that he didn't actually know how to find the rebels or even where to look for them. Where should I look for the rebels when I've got the book back? She opened her mouth to answer, but she faded away, and so did the scorched landscape as the cell reappeared. Damn it, the dream was over and so was their conversation. He pounded a fist on the mattress in frustration. She didn't give him any clues to find her people once he was free, but at least she knew he was here and that he planned to escape. Did she disappear on purpose to avoid telling me where to find the rebels? It was possible. She had no reason to trust him yet, and every reason to protect the rebels. Well, I'll show her that I'm trustworthy. Sometime later, the click of the bolt drawing back woke him again. It took a moment to remember that someone in charge told the guards who escorted him back to his cell to get someone to look at the gash Spike gave him. I wonder what happened to him.
He's in there. Shout if you need anything.
A gruff voice said, as the door swung open to admit a blurry blob. Garen sat up and rubbed his eyes to clear out the last vestiges of sleep from his eyes and his mind. Hopefully, that was enough to sharpen his wits, because he needed to be wide awake and at his most charming, since this might be the only opportunity to convince someone to help him. The door closed with a thud as he removed his hands from his face. The gray blob resolved into a veiled person in loose gray robes. Okay, that was good. The Versities wore gray, and they were probably the closest thing to a healer in hell. Garen tried not to grin as he ticked off the first box on his escape plan, get a Versati to visit him. Well, that task was complete. Now for the hard part, convince them to help him escape. The soft swish of cloth accompanied the Versati as they padded closer in soft-soled boots.
Entalai,
Whispered the book of names. At least that thing was talking to him again. It went quiet during the fight before, and he worried that he lost it. But if it was talking to him again, then he still had it. Garen would have cheered if his mouth worked. Now I just need to convince them to help me escape.
What are you doing here?
Entalai hissed as they stopped by the cot, and the pink glow of their eyes fell on him. What did pink mean? Versati were shape-shifting humanoids with color-changing eyes who drew power from seducing their prey. But they weren't limited to one gender like incubuses or succubuses, so their powers worked on everyone. And that included him when a certain part of him stood up to greet the Versati. Whoa, down boy. There's no time to play right now. We need to escape first. Garen adjusted his trousers to hide the effect that Entali's aura had on him, even though they already knew. After all, Versati had a suite of enhanced senses to help them seduce their prey, but those senses could also be used to block pain. Believe me, this wasn't my idea, but I also didn't get a choice about where I went. So let's chalk this up to bad luck. Garen sat up.
If our meeting is bad luck, then why should I help you?
Entali folded their arms and shoved their gloved hands into their sleeves. Were they upset? It sounded like they were. Garen cursed himself mentally, but not out loud since he screwed up once already. And that was more than enough. I didn't mean it like that.
Then how did you mean it?
Entali glared at him. That was a great question. How the hell should he answer it? I need to get back on their good side. But how? Garen tried to think of anything to say to salvage this situation.
I risked everything to help you escape last time. I shouldn't even talk to you.
Entali spun on their heel and marched toward the door. Wait, I know you're mad at me, but this time it's not just me who needs help. Was that the right thing to say? Probably not. Garen was better at being seduced than the reverse. Most of his trysts were after a battle, when the joy of survival led the survivors to make questionable decisions about who they slept with. But this argument was turning into a battle, and he rose to the occasion and slid off the cot. Some grand gesture might go a long way toward getting the help he needed. So he knelt on the stone floor and pressed his hands together in what he hoped was a beseeching manner.
What are you talking about?
Tally spun to face him, but they kept their back to the door. A woman who claimed to be the sleeping angel came to me, and she asked me to fetch something from the library of forbidden knowledge for her. I got caught stealing the object and brought here. Should he have left out the part about the woman? Garen couldn't tell since only Entali's eyes were visible through a slit in their waist-length veil, and they flashed with anger since they saw him, so he couldn't tell how news about the sleeping angel affected his audience.
You saw her and you spoke to her.
Tally strode toward him as their widening eyes faded to a mottled pink and blue. What did that mean? Yes, she appeared twice to me, but both times were just brief meetings. She left when I agreed to help. Garen rose and tried not to groan as his muscles ached from the accumulated abuse more than his stint as a gladiator.
What did she ask you to fetch? Do you still have the item?
Tally stopped a few feet away, and their hands opened and closed like they wanted to take the item away from him. Unfortunately, they couldn't. The book of names tattooed itself on his chest. Did I say too much? After all, he didn't know what side Tally was on. His confession could damn him to an interrogation with one of the Inquisitors, and that was something he needed to avoid since they could rip the truth from his mind.
I'm on her side. You can tell me. I won't tell the guards.
Tally must have turned up their pheromones because a pleasant floral scent filled the cell, and it made him smile like a fool. Pinpricks of pleasure skipped lightly over his exposed skin. Garen staggered as the sensation slid lower. He slapped himself. You're not here for a dalliance, so get your mind out of your pants and stick to the plan. For a moment, he couldn't remember what the next step in his plan was. Damn those pheromones. They kept twisting his thoughts back to more pleasurable things.
What did she ask you to fetch?
Tally must have crossed the room when he was distracted because they stood a few inches away and ran their gloved hands down his chest. If you don't turn down those pheromones, I'll rip your clothes off and have my way with you. And as fun as that might be, we don't have time for that right now. The guards could return at any moment. Garen caught Tally's hands and squeezed them. Tally sighed.
You're right, but I don't understand why you won't tell me what she asked you to fetch.
I don't want to tell you right now because I don't want the guards to hear. The fallen angel who dropped me off here thinks that someone else stole the item I took, and I need him to keep thinking that so he doesn't come after me until after I give the thing to the rebels. But I don't know how to find them. Thankfully, that's not my problem right now, but escaping is. Will you help me get out of here one more time? Tally glanced away, then nodded.
All right, but you must do something for me.
Okay, what do you want? Name it, and I'll see what I can do. Garen hoped the price wasn't more than he could pay.
Chapter 32. No Escape. No, Ivarian did what he should have done before. He punched Hyrel and pain shot through his fist like he punched metal instead of flesh. The guy had a hard chin.
Yes, we're abominations.
Hyrel laughed as they fell into a dark tunnel in the middle of a molten sea. Black clouds swirled around them in the searing heat, but he didn't burn. Ivarian called up every prayer he'd ever learned because that was the only thing that could save him now. A shadow fell over him as he remembered the prayer he learned when he was small and scared of shadows.
If you're ever scared and I'm not there, call on your angel to help.
Mom said, and he felt her hands on him, and for a moment, he was back there, curled up under the blanket on his bed at home.
Now repeat after me.
Angels, help me so in light I may live. When darkness comes, take me to where light lives. When I fall, take me to where I walk tall. At the end, fly me to where your heart lives. He repeated the words just as she taught him. Someone must have heard his prayer because a metal hand grabbed his other arm and wrenched him away from the man who claimed to be his cousin. The metal creature had black lines spinning in opposite directions on a field of white where its eyes should be, but it must see him because it arrested his fall. What are you? Ivarian would have drawn back in revulsion if the articulated metal creature didn't have a firm hold on his arm. Its lower half blurred as tiny metal things that whirred and clicked reconfigured its blocky human body into a crude metal approximation of a horse's legs. It seemed to gallop on the shimmering air, but maybe that was the heat haze making him imagine that. After all, how could a creature fly without wings?
We are chaos.
The creature shuddered and lightning bolts shot from its lower half into its chest.
No, we are the sword of the apocalypse. Where we conquer, famine follows,
said another gravelly voice from its mouth. Ivarian didn't need to ask what that meant. He once read a book about the end of days. You're a horseman of the apocalypse. But what was a horseman of the apocalypse doing here? Last he checked, the world wasn't ending. But maybe this one was since they were on a dead timeline. Cold dread crept up his spine. What would happen if they didn't get away from here before the end came to this timeline? How much time was left before that happened? Ivarian didn't know how to tell.
Yes, we bring the end of days.
The metal creature nodded so hard that winged metal things flew off its head and circled them. Then why are you here? Ivarian glanced down, but he couldn't see Hyrel anymore. Was he still falling through that dark tunnel? Where did it lead?
I need a time walker.
Why? Ivarian stared at the metal creature in shock. Weren't the riders of the apocalypse supposed to end the world? Why would it need to move through time? This was obviously the end, since everything crumbled into the molten orange liquid bubbling up through the cracks in the ground, or this rider wouldn't be here.
The upgrade I received when I became a rider of the apocalypse came with a few unfortunate downsides.
The metal creature shrugged as it flew higher above the destruction. What downsides? Ivarian scanned the ground for somewhere to land if he got free, but everything disintegrated into that orangey substance. What was this creature before it became a rider of the apocalypse? How did one become a rider of the apocalypse? Ivarian felt small and lost. Nothing in his upbringing prepared him for anything like this. What did one do when a rider of the apocalypse caught them?
Time means nothing when you are chaos, but we aren't pure chaos anymore.
Are you saying you can't move through time without help now? That sounded like a good thing to Ivarian. A rider of the apocalypse shouldn't show up unless summoned anyway, nor should it move around the timeline as it pleased. That brought up another problem because he had that power and it had caught him. He kicked the creature and his toes smarted from the blow, but it had no effect on the creature. How could he fight a thing made of articulated metal? Is that why you need a time walker? Ivarian gritted his teeth. The creature's grip hurt and his shoulder ached from it dragging him around by his arm.
Precisely. There's a thing your uncle promised to fetch.
And you want me to get it? Well, he wouldn't. Ivarian set his jaw since that was all he could do while dangling by an arm. He didn't know how he would escape this thing, but he would. Perhaps if he could find a way off this timeline and back onto his own, he might have some options. But he didn't know how Hyrel brought him here. What did you do, Uncle Hithaglir? How could he find out now when he was a prisoner of this creature?
Well, isn't that convenient? I also need a time walker, and you have one available.
A woman said as a red scaly hand wrapped around his waist. The dragon ripped him from the metal centaur's grasp right before a barbed tail slammed into the rider of the apocalypse and sent it tumbling end over end across the sky. Who are you? Ivarian tried not to struggle since the ground was a long way down and hot enough to bake him, despite the wind generated by their passage. He didn't want to fall, at least not until he was sure he'd survive the landing.
I'm a friend,
said the dragon as she flew onward, but he knew where they were going.
She's more than a friend,
Hyrel said, then broke up into gales of laughter. He sounded close by, so the dragon caught him too. Ivarian didn't know what to make of that, nor did he get much of a chance to think about it before a white flash signaled Hyrel left him. Now, how do I go back to where I belong?
Hush, you're in enough trouble already. Don't push it, or I'll ground you for the rest of your immortal life.
You can't do that,
Hyrel said. If he didn't generate that light, then who did?
I'm the final fate. I can do whatever I want, so you better not piss me off.
The dragon glared to her right, so that's probably where Hyrel was. That tracked with what he'd heard about Phaedras and the ex-goddess of fate. She was also his aunt. But what did she want with him? She was a time walker too, so she didn't need him or his magic to move through time. Her power eclipsed his anyway since she was a full goddess, and he was only a demigod, and he wasn't even fully trained. But that's my fault. I didn't want to learn how to use my magic. I just didn't see a need for it. And now the reasons for using it multiplied faster than his knowledge did. The dragon landed on the ridge overlooking geysers of molten liquid shooting skyward. Thank God that dark tunnel disappeared, so Hyrel couldn't try to throw him in again. The dragon released him. Ivarian stumbled, then sat down when his knees buckled. The dragon shrank as flames engulfed her. When the fire disappeared, a petite black woman regarded him as the wind tugged on her red dress. Her eyes glowed red, and they swirled as she regarded him.
Who are you? You're obviously a relative, so let's start there. Are you Hithaglir's son or Istiana's? They're the only two blondes in the family with your coloring. Unfortunately, they're twins, so that makes it hard to tell their offspring apart.
Thank you for saving me. Ivarian rose unsteadily and towered over the petite woman. How could she have so much power? It radiated off her in palpable waves.
You're polite, so you're probably my sister's son. That makes sense, actually.
She snapped her fingers.
To answer your question, I'm Phaedresin, but I suppose that's Aunt Faye to you since you're my sister's son.
Since the future was her domain and where he needed to go, Ivarian relaxed until he remembered the rules about time travel that affected his extended family. Oh God, I think I screwed up worse than my uncle. Ivarian dropped to his knees in the grass. What have I done?
Hey, take it easy.
Aunt Faye rushed to his side and patted his shoulder.
You're not in trouble, so you can calm down and talk to me.
But we're not supposed to know the future until we get there or bad things will happen. His mother never specified what those bad things were, but Ivarian had the impression they were world-endingly bad.
You're not supposed to know the future or your mother or your uncle or anyone descending from them. That's why I sent them away so they wouldn't see you. But the future is my domain, so I'm allowed to have foreknowledge.
Aunt Faye squeezed his shoulder.
So take a breath, then talk to me because I've got a lot of questions. But first I want to know why you're here.
You'd have to ask my cousin that. I'm only here because he brought me here against my will. Ivarian glared at Hyrel, and the jerk waved as he disappeared in a white flash. No, you can't leave me here. I don't know how to go home. And that's all he wanted right now, to go home and forget everything that happened. Well, maybe not everything. If his uncle didn't screw up the timeline, then he may never have met Ran or Rosalie.
Relax. I can move forward in time, so I can help you return to your time. I'm not bound to this dead timeline any more than you are.
Aunt Faye patted his back. A loud buzzing sound startled him as that metal centaur galloped toward them from the sky. Ivarian pulled his aunt down, and that creature passed over them.
What is that thing?
Aunt Faye blurred as flames consumed her. Ivarian let go and threw himself to the side before the flames could burn him. I don't know. I just know it wants me, but I don't know why.
Well, then we'd best keep you out of his hands.
Aunt Faye reached out of the fire and tried to grab him. Ivarian scrambled away from her. How do I know I can trust you or anything you've said? You could be in league with that thing.
I'm not, but I understand your reticence. You don't know me, but I know your mother well.
The flames receded, revealing his aunt again.
What can I do to prove that I've only got your best interests at heart? I can't summon your mother because the version of her in this time doesn't know she'll have a son in the future, and she can't know that until she has you. Foreknowledge is forbidden to those who can go back in time.
I don't know, and that was the root of his problem. Mom never introduced him to anyone on her side of the family except her twin brother, but she only did that because he showed up one day. Ivarian backed away with his hands raised until he tripped on the uneven ground. He tumbled end over end down the ridge, over rocks and grass. Not even a few bushes could break his fall. Ivarian stopped on the meadow at the base of the ridge and lay there, dizzy and staring at the sky, until 4 metal legs appeared in his peripheral vision. Before he could roll aside, metal hands grabbed him and lifted him.
Go back to where you came from.
The metal creature said, but it sounded like thousands of smaller creatures all tried to speak in unison and failed. The cold bit at Ivarian as a white light engulfed everything. The arrow of time reached for him with icy hands and pulled him back to it. But the metal creature didn't let go as that place of past events all stacked in a neat frozen line flickered around them. No, I can't bring that creature to the arrow of time, but he had no way to stop it.
Chapter 33. Summon Her. Rosalie poked at the roasted potatoes on her plate. They paired well with the roasted fowl and vegetables, but she might have taken too many. Mom always said my eyes are bigger than my stomach. I wish she wasn't right all the time. She pushed the potatoes around on her plate, and the scratch of her spoon on the ceramic plate sounded too loud in the silence hanging between them. Mirren said they'd talk more, but he avoided the topic while roasting the fowl, the greens, and the potatoes. Rand meticulously sliced everything with such single-minded focus. Anyone who didn't know he was a big softy would have backed away in fear at the tension radiating off him. So she understood why Mirren waited to bring up the subject until after he covered the red loomer crystals and put the now clean knife in the drawer with its fellows. Well, if no one else will bring it up, then I guess it's on me to do it. Rosalie squared her shoulders and readied herself for a verbal battle. Mirren set down his spoon with a loud clatter before she could get a word out.
You used to summon your aunt all the time, but you never worried about harming her.
Yeah, but I was just a kid, and she's not really alive. My magic is a lot more powerful now.
Rand hunched his shoulders and pushed the green beans around on his plate. Rosalie set her spoon down next to her plate and wiped her mouth on the cloth napkin resting on her lap. Should I join in? Rosalie had so many questions right now. How could Rand summon his aunt? Why would he even need to do that? Didn't his aunt visit sometimes? She bit her tongue to keep from asking and let them argue it out. Besides, if she got involved, she might make things worse. Unfortunately, her own mother was an only child, so Rosalie didn't have any blood-related aunts or uncles on her mother's side. Her father's side of the family was complicated since Mom left his abusive butt in some village and struck out on her own while she was with child. Years later, he sought her out and Rosalie met her father. Did we quarrel about that before I left? Rosalie set her napkin next to her spoon and plate as she tried to remember.
I still think you could.
Mirren stopped talking when Rand slashed his hand through the air just inches from his uncle's nose. The round kitchen table wasn't that large, and Rand had long arms. A bright light blinded Rosalie. When it dissipated, a brown-haired woman wearing a long white gown stood by his chair. Gold light fell on Rand from the halo floating over the woman's head. She looked like she could be his sister. Rand almost jumped out of his chair.
Auntie Sovin, what are you doing here? I didn't summon you.
I heard you call me, so I came right away. Is everything okay? Sovin flickered and disintegrated into a pile of shining motes on the floor. Rand rushed to her and knocked over his chair in his haste to get to her.
Auntie Sovin, are you okay? Please come back.
He dropped to his knees and scooped up the particles, but they vanished before he could collect them all.
No, what have I done?
He clutched at the air where his aunt had been.
Come back, Auntie Sovin.
Tears shone in his eyes. Rosalie rose and went to him. She didn't know what else to do, so she rested a hand on his shoulder, then squeezed it when that didn't comfort him. That's what happened to my mother too, in those alternative memories. She just faded away when I tried to go to her. Rand turned to her, anguish in his eyes.
How can I save my aunt when I couldn't even save my father?
That wasn't your fault.
Mirren slid off his chair and grimaced as he knelt by his nephew.
I couldn't save him either. Your father was stubborn and kept too many secrets. I never knew until after the fact what he was involved in.
Mirren caught his hands and squeezed them. Rosalie gave Rand's shoulder another squeeze. But you can help me get Ivarian back. We can only save our loved ones in the past, not here in the present. And Avarian is the only one here who can time walk. Rand hung his head.
Or so he claims. We don't have any proof of that.
Because he hasn't stuck around long enough for that. Rosalie suppressed a flash of anger that she had to point that out. But this time, we'll keep him here long enough to get some answers, she muttered. And that was a threat she meant to carry out no matter what she must do. Avarian must stay long enough for them to sort out what the hell was happening and cobble together a plan to undo it.
Don't hurt yourself on my account.
Rand helped his uncle to rise and sit on a chair again.
Thank you.
Mirren hugged his nephew, then faced her.
How will you keep him here? I'd like to talk to him too.
Leave that to me. Rosalie paced and didn't care if that was rude. Her mind raced, but would any of her ideas actually work? Never mind that for now. I can't try to prevent Avarian from leaving again until we get him back. She stopped pacing when Rand stepped into her path. Will you help me summon him? If I do it myself, I might hurt him. But if you do it, she stopped, because she didn't know how to end that question except to shrug helplessly.
I won't hurt him, but I also won't explode our home.
Mirren stacked their dishes on top of his plate.
That's why I'd rather you do it. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Rand glanced around the room.
All right, let's clear some space in the living room. I still remember how Dad summoned the Queen of all trees. I'd rather adapt something I know well for our needs. There's less of a chance that something will go catastrophically wrong. But it's never zero.
Rand lifted one end of the couch and moved it to the edge of the living area. But you could wish for 0 errors. Rosalie hurried to grab the other end. It would go faster if she helped him, and worry twisted her gut. She had a bad feeling she might need to repeat this procedure without Rand someday. I'd better study what he does in case I need to know in the future. Or worse, while she was in the past. Avarian would take her with him. It was only a question of when and what argument would sway him. Rand scowled at her.
I'm not adding anything to the spell other than what's needed to summon your boyfriend as safely and humanely as possible.
He's not my boyfriend. Rosalie blew a lock of hair out of her eyes and lifted the other end of the low table between the couches.
You keep saying that, but I just don't believe you.
Rand shook his head and lifted the other side of the table.
Where can we put this so it's out of the way?
We could put it in my room temporarily. How much space do you need? Rosalie glared at him, and her face felt hot. Why must he tease me?
A lot. Let's get some blankets, pillows, and bandages ready too, just in case.
Rand backed toward her room, and she followed. I hope this works. Rosalie glanced around to make sure she wouldn't crash into anything else. Once they cleared away a large space in the living room, Rand rubbed his hands together.
Okay, this may not work on the first try or the second or even the 10th try.
I have faith in you, and I know you'll keep trying until you get it right.
Mirren sat on the couch against the wall under the window, right by the spot where the spell was. Rand shook his head.
Yeah, well, it'll take more than faith to do this.
Rand froze, but his lips moved. Did he start? Rosalie sat next to Mirren on the couch.
No, I just remembered something I used to say to my dad.
Rand laughed, so the memory must be a funny one. What did you remember? She tapped his back with the tip of her foot when he didn't answer her. Rand smiled as he surveyed the floor.
I used to tell my dad that I believed in him before he did something hard. It always made him feel better.
I believe in you. I know you can do this.
Mirren leaned back and made himself comfy. I believe in you too. Otherwise, she wouldn't have tried to convince him. Rosalie decided not to admit that since she didn't want him to change his mind about this. He was still her best chance to get Avarian back and some answers too.
Thanks, I might need all the belief you two can muster. Should we pick up the carpet? Dad used to draw on the ground, and I don't think you want me to do that on the carpet.
Rand waved to the thick carpet under his feet.
I'd prefer you didn't mark it up, but I don't know if we can pick up the carpet. It's cut to fit the space with no room around the edges.
Mirren rose despite the doubts he expressed.
Do you have to mark it up?
Rand shrugged.
That's how Dad constructed the spell. He drew lots of circles.
Yeah, but he didn't use anything that would leave a permanent mark. Can't you use your magic like he did?
Rosalie slid her hand into her skirt pocket and touched the scroll with the summoning spell. She didn't let it out of her sight, even for a moment, since finding it. Nor had she mentioned it to anyone, but maybe now was the time. Should I show them the spell I found?
I could try.
Rand crouched in the middle of the space, and his fingers glowed white. Where he traced his finger over the carpet, he left a glowing white line behind. Rosalie sat back on the couch and removed her hand from her pocket. If Rand couldn't do this his way, then she'd mention it. But she doubted it would help since Avarian was human, not a pagan god. I hope this works. She crossed her fingers as the lines Rand drew became a great shining circle with many smaller circles inside it, building to a pattern, and she memorized it, in case she needed it to cast the summoning spell in her pocket.
Chapter 34. Fight the Gateway. Arginil closed his tearing eyes to protect them from the blinding light of the gateway. Heat blasted him as he flew into the eye of the maelstrom swirling around the eye-shaped thing coalescing into the gateway's terminus, and he felt around for something to grab. But his hands encountered nothing but hot air. That's not possible. There must be something I can hold or push. Since the gateway is made of compacted magic, it must have mass. Arginil groped around for a handle or anything he could hold, but the particles of magic ripped apart by the gateway's maker passed through his hands as if they weren't there at all. No, there must be a way to move it. Arginil shoved his hands into the gateway, ignoring the heat, but it didn't even flicker. Why can't I move it? Fire raced along his sleeves toward his feathered wings, but Arginil ignored that. He would heal from any wound eventually, and he had nothing but time after he dealt with this thing.
Stop or you'll destroy yourself.
The agent of order shouted from somewhere below. Something slammed into his chest and knocked Arginil away from the gateway. He opened his eyes and shoved the tether away from him.
Look out.
The agent of order shouted. A metal hand grasped his arm and pulled him out of the way of another tether shooting toward him. The ray shot past them and probably stuck to the library's facade. Thank you. One collision with a tether is enough for all eternity. Arginil jerked his arm free.
You're welcome. You can't stop this thing if it knocks you out. Look, the gateway is falling.
The agent of order pointed upward as the eye of the gateway slid down its tethers like a legless spider toward the main building of the library. No, we can't let it land. We must stop it. Arginil flew toward the space beneath the gateway. If he couldn't push or pull it, maybe he could block it with his body. But that would be tough, because the gateway expanded until it was wider than he was tall, and half as wide as the roof it hovered above.
What are you doing?
The agent of order asked as a metal hand grabbed his ankle and yanked him backward away from the gateway. Why did you stop me? Arginil kicked at the metal creature.
Because you can't move it that way. We need to find another way.
The agent of order let go of his ankle, and the gateway stopped perhaps 500 feet above the library's main building. It was too close. They were running out of time to stop it from landing. Worse still, it would open once it touched down. Do you have any ideas? Because I'm all out and nothing has even slowed the gateway down. Arginil tugged at his hair just to do something. He couldn't let that gateway land on the library's roof, or it might blow the roof off when it opened.
What about the tethers?
The agent of order hovered beside him on its metal wings. I tried cutting them already, but they regenerate faster than I can cut them down. Arginil stared at the slate roof below him. Was there enough time to remove the most dangerous items from the library? Where could I take them to keep them out of reach?
Then there's no way to stop it.
The agent of order touched his shoulder, probably to comfort him. I can't accept that. Arginil threw off his hand. There must be a way and he must find it, but he just couldn't think of anything else to try as he surveyed the tethers digging into his library. But they didn't attach to every building within its high walls, just the main building. Why that one when the 4 towers were twice as tall? Not one tether touched any of the towers. Why was that? It must have something to do with what's inside the main library building. Arginil flipped through the pages of his mental catalog of all the items in the main building.
I can help you. I know how to move the gateway, and I'll tell you if you'll do something for me.
A woman said. Who said that? Arginil spun and looked for her. Shadows moved on the rocky plain separating the library from the city. Man-shaped shadows crept around the remnants of a long-ago battle, using the large pieces of broken masonry for cover as they left the collapsed wall of the city behind and struck out for the library.
I did.
A woman appeared in the middle of the debris field between the library and the city, and her white robes billowed as she regarded him with glowing violet eyes just like all the angels. The fallen and the ascendant angels alike all had those same eyes, so at a glance from above, he couldn't tell if she had fallen too. How do I know you can tell me what I need to know? Arginil pulled his wings in and dropped. He landed in a crouch before the woman, and the wind of his passage blew her black hair away from her face. She was beautiful like all angels, so he ignored that. It wasn't hard. Angels had no carnal desires, nor could they experience lust. At least that was true before they fell from grace and lost all access to the divine and the gifts of the Spirit. Many tried to fill the hole that left inside them with carnal pleasures.
But not you. Carnal things don't interest you. You hunger for knowledge. That's why you built the library.
Her mind voice slipped in between his thoughts in ways he hadn't experienced since leaving heaven so long ago. Get out of my mind. Arginil shut the doors of his mind and her out. It had been a long time since anyone dared not only to read his mind, but to insert their thoughts into it, and the violation stung his pride.
You're a puzzle, Argia.
She tilted her head as if she were examining him. Don't call me that. You have no right to use that name. Arginil slashed his hand through the air and rose from his crouch. Anger flashed through him at the nickname the captain of the angelic hosts called him a long time ago. It sounded wrong on her lips.
Perhaps not, but my offer stands. I can help you move the gateway, but I require something in return.
She extended her hand and with it, her offer of aid. What do you want? Although he could guess, since she was an angel in hell, she must also be one of the fallen like him. And all the fallen angels coveted powerful things. What does she want from the library? And is it something I could part with?
I know what you're thinking, but you're wrong. What I want isn't inside the library.
She stared right at him. Then where is it? Arginil didn't know what she wanted. If it was a powerful relic that somehow escaped him, then she just needed to point him in the right direction, and he would gladly capture it and seal it in the library where no one could access it.
I want you for the rebellion I'm planning.
That wasn't what he thought she'd say, not at all. Her statement caught him so off guard that he just stared at her. What rebellion?
Oh, come, you're not as isolated as you pretend. You've heard the rumors about me, and they're all true. I'm gathering a force to take on the adversary and end his reign of pain and suffering.
She circled him as she presented her offer, but she didn't touch him.
You've wanted to dethrone him for a very long time, and you would have done so already, but something stopped you. I want to remove that barrier.
Why me? There are plenty of the fallen who want to fight him. Why not ask them? Arginil turned his back on her and faced the high walls of his library. To pay her price, he'd have to leave the library undefended, and that was unacceptable. There were too many dangerous spells and relics within its walls.
You're the only being in hell who has the power to take on the adversary and win. I will help you move the gateway if you agree to join my rebellion, and, when the time comes, face the angel who deceived you and conned you into helping his rebellion. That's all I ask.
She stepped in between him and the library and extended her hand again. Memories cut him as flashes of the morning star, or the adversary, as he was known then, accosting him in the amethyst city of Eversong. The purple crystal spires surrounded a fountain, but Arginil no longer remembered why he was there in that city on the edge of heaven. But he'd never forget what the morning star said as the wind tugged at their hair and robes.
Why should humans choose their destiny when we can't choose ours?
What are you talking about? Arginil remembered sinking down onto the wall, enclosing the decorative fountain and squeezing the scroll in his hands. The morning star sauntered toward him, his hands tucked into the sleeves of his robes.
I know it chafes at you. It chafes at me too. Why should they have free will when it's denied to us?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You didn't choose to be a warrior.
The morning star stopped and touched the sword sheath attached to Arginil's belt.
You hunger for knowledge, and you'd record all the knowledge in the world if you were free to do so.
The morning star touched the scroll Arginil clutched and let his fingers trail along his hand. But he was right. Even in memory, his words still struck home. What are you saying? Arginil asked then, spellbound by the archangel who knew his deepest desire.
I want to change things so you can put the sword down and take up the quill hidden in your pocket. I want to unchain our souls so we may be as free as the mortals to choose our own paths. Will you help me do that?
The morning star had looked at him like all things were possible with his help as he extended his hand. Arginil pushed away the memories, but that didn't change the past. I said yes that morning, never realizing what I was signing up for. When he realized what he'd done, it was too late. The morning star changed from a radiant archangel beloved by all the hosts of heaven to the most reviled fallen angel in hell and the self-styled adversary of all life.
We're running out of time. Make your decision soon.
The agent of order reminded him, but the creature didn't land. But there was only one answer he could give. Arginil nodded. After all, one rebellion damned him. Perhaps another could restore some of his lost grace. I'll help you, but only if that doesn't imperil the library or anything inside it. There are relics in there that could destroy your rebellion, and we must always keep them under lock and key. That wasn't negotiable.
I agree. Since I don't want the library breached either, listen carefully to what my spies discovered. The creator of that gateway is a corrupted angel, but he doesn't have the power to finish the gateway. So not all the rays the gateway sends out are tethers. Some seek divine power. That's why the gateway formed over the library. You have divine objects inside it, and it needs their power to complete itself.
She pointed at the gateway. Now that he knew what to look for, Arginil saw it. Half of the 30 rays connected to the gateway flickered like power passed up them, and he wanted to slap himself for not noticing that sooner. After all, the gateway is a magical tunnel that pierces all the realms between the one you're in and the one you want to reach, and that takes a tremendous amount of power.
You're talking about the gateway as if it were sentient.
The agent of order flew backward to put some space between it and them.
It is aware in some regards because it must be aware enough to bore through each realm to reach its destination. How else can one caster create a gateway if it weren't?
She glared at the agent of order as if its existence angered her. If what you're saying is true, then the gateway can sense divine power and send out tethers seeking it, just like a spider in its web. At least he thought spiders in the mortal world operated like that, but it was a very long time ago that he last saw a real spider, so he might be mistaken about that. Not that it mattered. Once the gateway was gone from the library, then he could spend some time checking that assumption.
That's what's happening. Now that you know, you can move the gateway to the city, and that will stop the demons from coming here.
She folded her arms and vanished.
As for our bargain, I'll call you when the rebellion needs you.
Arginil batted her mind voice away. Anger shot through him again at the intrusion of her thoughts into his mind. But he was angrier at himself for leaving an opening for her to exploit. Those memories from before the fall must have rattled him more than he realized if his mental shields weakened enough for her to insert her thoughts into his mind where they weren't welcome. But he raised those shields again to keep her out.
Who was she?
The agent of order asked. I don't know her name, but I've heard they call her the Sleeping Angel. But he was sure the lady had another name in the days before the fall, and he'd find it later when the library was safe again. Arginil turned and flew toward the library's main building. There was a hatch on the roof he could use to drop into the atrium.
Where are you going?
The agent of order followed him. I need to fetch the holy relic the gateway is trying to use to power the final stages of its creation. If she's right, it'll attach tethers to it, and let's hope I'm strong enough to tow the thing into the city. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was worth a try. Arginil landed on the roof, but 2 tethers covered the hatch. Damn! He flew to a window instead and pulled his power around him before punching through the metal shutters in the glass. Someone could fix both later. Arginil flew over the shelves of books and dropped into a crouch before a hidden door. He rose and pulled back the 5th book on the 7th shelf to activate the mechanism that slid the door aside. Magic shrouded a room of stone, steel, scrolls, and debris from its recent robbery. I wondered how the thief is faring in the spire. Arginil passed the pedestal where the Book of Names sat for a long time under a shield and headed to the iron chest along the wall. Light spilled out when he lifted the lid, but his shadow eclipsed it when he reached inside. I hope this works.
You've been listening to Part 8 of Gateway to Hell, Book 1 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy, by Melinda Kucera. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the next part publishes. The Rogue Gods Trilogy is available as an ebook and paperback and soon, a full-cast audiobook. Click the link in the description to order your copy. If you love the Rogue Gods Trilogy, then you'll love Melinda's other epic fantasy adventure books too. They're just as full of magic and mayhem and characters who will do anything to achieve their goals. Check them out at the link in the description, and while you're there, sign up for her newsletter so her characters can talk directly to you. Thank you for listening.